Seven more Palestinians have been killed by the terrorist Benjamin Netanyahu for starvation. This means Netanyahu has now killed 154 people, including 84 children and babies, as a result of his forced starvation in the last few days alone. And today's victims do not include those 100 plus Palestinians who were killed in fresh Israeli bombings. Helping Netanyahu carry out this forced starvation is Donald Trump, his rogue cabinet colleagues, and other members of his administration, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, and his cabinet colleagues such as David Lammy, Yvette Cooper, and Lisa Nandy. Among others, French President Emmanuel Macron and German Chancellor Friedrich Merz. It's absolutely important to keep repeating these names so that we never forget the poster boys and poster girls of the biggest Holocaust of our generation since the Second World War. So that we never forget how these men and women pretending to be civilized helped a dreaded medieval gang of bloodthirsty terrorists in a settler colony carry out cold-blooded murders of hundreds of thousands of unarmed and defenseless civilians, with majority of them being children and babies. Let these genocidal maniacs forever carry the stain of this mass murder with their image. Although these genocidal maniacs from the West are now pretending to care about Palestinians after 2 years of unflinching support to the Israeli barbarism against 2 million people. A convicted felon and suspected pedophile, Donald Trump, is now publicly distancing himself from his mad dog called Benjamin Netanyahu. This is what he told reporters on his way back to the US from Scotland.
Can I ask about the First Lady? You mentioned a couple of weeks ago her role in talking to you about the war in Ukraine and perhaps a big part of your evolution in thinking. Have you discussed the crisis in Gaza and the terrifying
I have, and she thinks it's terrible, and she sees the same pictures that you see and that we all see, and I think everybody, unless they're pretty cold-hearted or worse than that, nuts. There's nothing you can say other than it's terrible when you see the kids. And those are kids, whether they talk starvation or not, those are kids that are starving. They are starving. And you see the mothers, they love them so much, and there's just nothing they seem to be able to do. They got to get them food, and we're going to get them food.
Now try and remember his utterances and those made by the two horrible women from the podium of the State Department and the White House in the recent past. These horrible women shamelessly rejected any references to starvation and blamed Hamas for the blockade caused by Netanyahu. These horrible people behaved as if Palestinians did not exist.
Is it the department's assessment that the current, policy towards the conflict is working in drawing it to a close? Because when you see 79 people killed waiting for aid, which is one of the highest numbers we've seen over the course of the 2 years,
it's absolutely horrible.
It feels like things are going in the wrong direction.
Well, what it shows us here is that the enemy, the barbarian framework that started this on October 7th with the mass murder of Jews, the biggest mass murder of Jews since the Holocaust, they are going to be upset and strike back when there appears to be the end to the kind of conflict, this never-ending generational conflict that some of the worst people in the world, state sponsor of terrorism, Iran, and their death squads, have relied on fear, have relied on indecision, have relied on people not wanting to face hard decisions. So, of course, they're going to act and cause more terror and more death in the hopes that people will retreat.
In the UK, Starmer tried to take a moral high ground only yesterday by announcing that he would recognize Palestine if terrorist Netanyahu doesn't stop starving people. In other words, he wouldn't recognize Palestine if Netanyahu stops starving people, but keeps slaughtering them through other means, such as by dropping bombs or using his snipers for target practice. Now you know the level of depravity of these compromised politicians in the UK and the West. Then there was this revelation on Sky News by one of Starmer's own colleagues.
When the history books are written, they're going to say who spoke up, who spoke out. And I think the announcement today was and is an important announcement, even though it's somewhat confusing, because I was on a MP's briefing and we were told it isn't conditional. So I just wonder in the next few days whether it's clumsy speech writing.
That's interesting. So you were told on a briefing for Labour MPs that it wasn't conditional, and that does seem to have changed now because it's saying this will happen if Israel doesn't end the...
I wonder just if tomorrow whether that's going to be clarified.
But this has still not affected the rogue organization called the BBC. This organization continues to make light of the Palestinian suffering and protect Benjamin Netanyahu for his war crimes. For the BBC, people in Gaza are not dying of starvation, but malnutrition, because calling it starvation would also entail the naming of the culprits behind this unspeakable crime. In contrast, Sky News was at least showing some humanity. This interview of former First Minister of Scotland, Hamza Yusuf, whose wife is of Palestinian origin, would move you. I was also quite moved by the empathy shown by the Sky News presenter, Sophie Ridge.
Can I talk to you about the situation in Gaza? Because I know, of course, you have relatives, your wife's family who are there. If I may, you know, what are they experiencing?
It's impossible for me to put it into words. Yesterday we received some very sad news that my father-in-law's cousin, who's only a few years older than me, has 2 children, was killed by the Israeli forces trying to get flour. His family begged him not to go to get food, but he couldn't bear to see his family starving. So he went to get flour, Mahmoud. He's not Hamas, so I have to say that. He's not a terrorist, never taken part in any armed struggle. Went out to get flour for his family, was shot in the stomach, and then a tank ran over him. And my father-in-law, I spoke to yesterday to give him my condolences, inconsolable with grief. And then Nadia's cousin, Sally, who we've spoken about before, has 4 children who are becoming emaciated in her arms. And I don't have the words to describe it. I mean, I'm a father of 3 beautiful girls, and you know, I feel helpless, choked with really pain when I think if they're in pain. How can we possibly imagine what a Gazan mother or father must be going through when they themselves are starving, watching their children become skeletons in their own arms and being able to do nothing about it? And I think, look, ultimately, you and I discuss the geopolitics because that is important to do. But what we ask people, what we plead with people to do, is just think about this as a father, a mother, or just a human being. And surely we must do everything we can in our gift to stop this atrocity from continuing. And that's why, you know, I plead with the Prime Minister, I use that word, I plead with the Prime Minister to take meaningful action, sanctions, end all arms sales to Israel, not for necessarily geopolitical reasons, but because I want to see an end to the inhumanity that we're witnessing.
I'm sorry about the situation that, you know, people that you love are facing, and I know how difficult it must be to talk about this. So I just want to say, you know, thank you for coming on and for telling their stories and for telling us what they're experiencing.
While the legacy media in the West may have become a willful participant in the ongoing genocide in Gaza, independent voices both in the UK and the US have risen to the occasion to teach these rogue elements masquerading as journalists a lesson on journalism. Watch Crystal Ball from the US and her interview with this Jewish Democratic senator from Michigan.
Do you accept that the Israeli plan, as reported by Haaretz, as discussed openly by ministers like Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, as backed by the President of the United States, is forced ethnic cleansing?
I think we have, as recently as yesterday, the Prime Minister of Israel talking about forced migration into certain areas and then potentially out of the country. Mm-hmm. That is not legal. That is not on any international standard since World War II. And I've been clear about that. So I would ask for a little bit of an open mind.
Well, what I would ask is, listen, I'm a YouTuber. You know, I have my words, that's all I have. Yeah. But you're a United States Senator. Mm-hmm. Like you're not the president, but you have power. So what are you going to do Because so far what we've seen, I mean, you voted for some of the aid that's been used to massacre children and innocents. You have backed Israel, as far as I can tell, from your voting record at almost every turn. You voted for a definition of anti-Semitism that would, codify anti-Zionism as anti-Semitism. You voted as a member of the House to sanction the ICC for indicting Benjamin Netanyahu, who you just admitted is a war criminal, by your own words. So are you going to join Senator Angus King, Senator Bernie Sanders in saying no more aid to this country that is committing war crimes against innocent civilians?
I think the first thing, if you're asking about what to do with power, and I would offer that right now Democrats own nothing in Washington.
People like Trump and Starmer may try to fool us, but rest assured, we wouldn't let historians falter in accurately documenting the worst genocide ever in modern history and people who perpetrated these crimes against humanity. That's it from me. Thank you very much for your support of this platform and our journalism on buymeacoffee.com and Patreon. If you too think that our journalism is worth supporting, then you too should consider becoming part of it. In the meantime, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please do so, because that's one of the many ways you can support independent journalism. God bless you all.